Hello, welcome to Papa Nick's Music. I am, as always, your host, Papa Nick Lewis, and today we are talking about Queen. I teased this a few weeks ago. I gave you my top 10 Queen songs that were written by Brian May. Spoiler alert, Brian May is the main reason why I'm a Queen fan. But I told you in that video that I was going to be going through their entire discography, and that's what we're here for today. We're going to be ranking the albums of Queen. I briefly thought about doing a top 10, and not just so that it would give me an excuse to drink some Schofferhofer, because that's good beer. But also because when you're doing a top 10, you've got a little bit of suspense when you get up towards the top. But it's been a while since I've done a full album ranking, so I thought I'd just go ahead and do a straight album ranking here. Now, when I get into this, there are going to be a few decisions that I've made that are frankly going to shock you. And that, regardless of what the content of the ranking is, that's going to be true. The one thing that I've realized when the reading that I've done and the videos that I've watched is that no two Queen album ranking videos are all that similar. There are a few consistencies. Most people think that this album is going to be toward the top and this other album is going to be towards the bottom. But for every album that you, Queen diehard fan that you are, for every album that you think is just a gem, there's another diehard Queen fan out there that frankly doesn't care much for that album, relatively speaking. So, I think one of the reasons for this is that there is such a wide variety in a wide variety in terms of the musical styles that they do. I mean, any given Queen album, you're going to have a few hard rock songs. You're going to have some prog rock songs. You're going to have a little bit of dance pop thrown in. You're going to have music hall. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on there. And anytime you've got that many elements that are combining, you're going to have people who are coming in from different perspectives and who are looking at the music differently. That's one of the strengths of Queen. That's why so many people, when I was a kid, so many of my friends and I liked Queen, because there was so much variety there. I mentioned in my Brian May video that Queen and ELO were the two common currencies, right? They were the lingua franca that we could use when we were talking about music, because we all liked those bands. We may have liked other bands and we didn't agree on those. I mean, I had friends who were big fans of Journey, and I've never been a big fan of Journey. I was a big fan of Kiss, and not all my friends were big fans of Kiss. But Queen and ELO we could agree on. And I think that variety in their music is one of the reasons why that was true. But that means ranking their albums is hard to do, because we're all listening for different reasons. So, as I go through these, I'm going to tell you, these are the way I rank them. My least favorite up to my favorite. And while I do, as I'm about to do, the subjectivity notice on all of my videos, it is of dire importance today, because there are going to be some decisions I've made here that you, the diehard Queen fan, are just going to be gobsmacked that I could see it that way. Right? That's nature of the beast. Okay? The other thing to keep in mind is that I think a few of these albums are mediocre. I'll be honest there, and I'll give you the dividing line once we've gotten past the mediocre stuff. But once we've gotten past the mediocre stuff, everything else is good to great. And even their mediocre stuff is still engaging. It's still decent music, right? They're albums that I would give C's to, but I would completely understand if other people are giving them B's, right? Okay. So, without further ado, let's get into the subjectivity notice. Artistic appreciation is inherently subjective. There is no such thing as objectively good or objectively bad art. There is only art that I like or art that I do not like. And as long as we keep that in mind, this is a wonderful conversation. It's entertaining. We're sitting around and we're shooting the shit and we're having a good time. As soon as one or the other of us starts thinking in terms of right and wrong and objective features of, well, objectively, that's the best. No, there's no such thing as objective quality in music. It's all subject to perspective. It's all subject to taste. So, I'm not saying that My last ranked album is objectively a crap album. My top ranked album is objectively their best album. There is no such thing as objective crap or objective the best. Yeah. The other thing we have to do, we have to talk about the ground rules. Since this is a ranking video here at Papa Nick's Music, when we rank albums, we rank original studio albums of that are primarily intended to be albums. I'm not sure why I said of there. So original, no compilations, no greatest hits, none of that nonsense. Studio, we don't do live albums. Albums, it's got to be a full album. We don't do EPs. That have as their primary purpose being a collection of songs, which means we don't do things like soundtracks and Christmas albums and stuff like that. Which means there are a couple of albums that I can go ahead and take off of the list. First of all, I'm going to give it an honorable mention, but I'm not going to include it on the list. And yes, I've got all of these in CD. And that is the Queen and Paul Rodgers CD. I got this when it was first released because I'm a big fan of these guys, and it's not bad. But I'll be honest with you, I doubt I've listened to it more than 3 or 4 times, and I can't tell you what any of these songs sound like. I didn't listen to it as I was preparing for this video, just because it's not, to me, it's not really Queen. I mean, it's got the name, but it's not really Queen. It's Queen with Paul Rodgers, so we're not counting this. I'm not saying stay away from it or anything like that. I'm just saying that we're not going to count it. We're also not going to count Flash. Oh! We're not going to count the Flash Gordon soundtrack. We're not counting the Flash Gordon soundtrack because it is a soundtrack, and we don't do soundtracks here. That being said, I like this album. I really like the movie. Oh my God, oh. I don't use the phrase guilty pleasure anymore, but if I were to use the phrase guilty pleasure, Flash Gordon is going to be on that list. I love how campy and just goofy the movie is, and I like the music. I remember when I bought the soundtrack, walking through the record store, I pick up that I actually bought it on cassette, but pick up that title, I go up to the counter, and I had several other things. And as the guy running the register, he looks and he's okay, and then he picks up that Flash Gordon soundtrack, and he looked at me and he goes, "Have you heard this?" Because this is not like a regular Queen album. And I said, "That's okay. I just came from the movie," because I literally had just left the movie and I was hitting the record store on my way home. And so, yeah, I knew exactly what the music sounded like. But it cracked me up that, are you sure? It's one of the few times in my life where I've ever tried to buy a record and the clerk said, are you sure about this? But Flash Gordon, wonderful music. It's just not a real album. It's a movie soundtrack. Okay. That means once we've gotten rid of those two, we've got 14 titles. So coming in at number 14, those of you who have watched my previous ranking videos, sorry, it's allergy season here in San Antonio, the corporate headquarters of Papa Nick's Music, which means I'm going to be doing a lot of this kind of stuff as I go through this. I just apologize right up front. If you've watched one of my previous album ranking videos, you know that when I start thinking in terms of evaluative quality, when I'm starting to think in terms of which album I like better than which other album, that sort of thing, I think in terms of letter grades. It's the most logical, the most natural way for me to sort albums. And I give an album a C if it's an average, competent album. It's not necessarily something I recommend, but I'm not going to recommend you stay away from it either. It's a good, competent, professionally done album. It's what I would expect from a professional musician recording with a professional producer under professional conditions. You know, it's competent, right? If it gets a B, that means it's good. It stands out from the crowd, and I recommend it. I like it. If it gets an A, it is stunning. I strongly recommend it. It is among my favorite works. It will be among my favorite works. If it gets a D, that means there's some flaw to it. That means it's not just that I can't recommend it. I actively recommend against it. I don't think you want this album. This is, have you heard this? Are you sure you want to buy this? That's me with a D. And then if it gets an F, that's because it's not even competent. It's not even professional. It's complete garbage, and why anybody would waste their money on it is beyond me. Okay? The lowest the lowest ranked albums I have are these first two, and they are both C minuses. They're competent. There are things that I like about them individually. It's just the bulk of it is, yeah. And my number 14 album, sorry, it's stuck there. My number 14 is their 1989 album, The Miracle. And I will be honest with you, one of the reasons why it's at number 14, because I, in essence, have a three-way tie down here, because all three of these that I'm looking at have C minuses. And so, legitimately, I could put them in any order. And this is the album cover that creeps me out the most. So it goes in the bottom place. It's not a bad album. I'm not saying don't buy it. I'm just not going to recommend that you get it. We've got a few good performances on here. Brian's guitar on I Want It All, the vocal arrangement on Party, the bass on Invisible Man, all pretty good. But as far as I'm concerned, I Want It All is really the only reason you would ever want to buy this album. Everything else is largely forgettable. There are bits and pieces, snips, and yeah. So, number 14, The Miracle. Number 13, in this virtual three-way tie here. From 1986, we have A Kind of Magic. It's tempting to cut A Kind of Magic out for the same reason that we cut Flash Gordon out, because this is almost a soundtrack album. As you know, if you're a diehard Queen fan, about half of these songs were featured in the movie The Highlander. We've got little bits of dialogue and such, and it's not a movie I've ever seen, and based on this, I don't know that I want to see it. Don't come at me, Highlander fans. I apologize. I'm just going for a little bit of humor there. We've got two good songs on here. The first two, One Vision and A Kind of Magic. I like both of those songs. The rest of it, according to my note, two good songs followed by a mishmash of meh and B-movie cheese. Yeah, there are a couple of spots where I'd swear this is John Carpenter, doing one of his soundtracks. Not a big fan of Kind of Magic. And then my final C minus. There it is. My final C minus is 1984's The Works. The problem I've got with The Works, I've been saying it's a three-way tie here because they've all got C minuses, but this actually has the advantage over A Kind of Magic and The Miracle, because there are more bits on this that I like. The problem that I have with it is that it is so derivative. Sorry, got to switch my notes here. The first half of the album is either trite or derivative of earlier work. We've got I'm looking at my notes here. Radio Gaga is not a bad song. But when I was a kid, the radio was wonderful, but now it's crap. Oh, Jesus Christ. Seriously, do we need another song talking about how wonderful radio was back in the day? Do we need another song telling us about how wonderful rock and roll is? I mean, that ground has been plowed often enough that if you're going to start plowing it now, you better be planting some awfully interesting crops in it. Radio Gaga's not that interesting. We've got Tear It Up has a stomp clap straight out of We Will Rock You. There are bits of It's a Hard Life that sound to me like they were cut and paste directly out of Play the Game. Man on the Prowl is Crazy Little Thing, except we're not looking at Elvis anymore. We're looking at Jerry Lee Lewis, I guess. But there are bits on this that I do like. I do like I Want to Break Free. I do like Keep Passing the Open Windows. I do like Hammer to Fall. There are some really good songs on here. So I think the C- that I gave it might be a little bit harsh. It's definitely, I think, a notch better than the first two I started with. Now, I've seen enough of these videos to know that I'm not going to get a whole lot of pushback on those three. There are a lot of people who like A Kind of Magic, don't like the other two. There will be people who like The Miracle, don't like the other. All right, so there will be the occasional people who will snipe, but I don't think that this is exactly, Stop the Press's headline news that I've got these three down here where I've got them. This next one, I'm going to remind you what I started with. It's personal preference. It's which ones do I like, which ones do I not like. I'm putting this album at number 11. I'm giving this album a solid C. I was not impressed with this album when it first came out, and I am not impressed with it to this day. And I apologize right up front if that causes offense, or if it hurts, or if you think I'm a moron or whatever. It's all subjective. You can tell I'm expecting a lot of pushback on the fact that I have at number 11 News of the World, which is a really popular album among fans, but I've never liked it that much. I like it better than A Kind of Magic, and I like it better than The Miracle. I would say it and The Works are on par. Part of the reason why I don't like this album as much as the ones that follow is that I've never liked We Are the Champions. I mean, talk about, going out on a limb. Jeez, that's borderline blasphemy. But yeah, I've never cared much for We Are the Champions. No, don't care for it. On this album, really, we've got 3 songs that I really like. We've got and I'm reading off my notes rather than the back of the CD because I don't want to put my glasses on. We Will Rock You is fantastic. Sheer Heart Attack is brilliant, and It's Late, fantastic. And everything else, take or leave. Not that fond of. Never have been. Sorry if it offends. I apologize. Okay, coming in to my number 10. We've made it into my top 10. Also going to get a lot of pushback on this one. And again, I apologize. But my 10th favorite, in a virtual tie here, because I've got 2 albums that have the same letter grade. But at number 10, I've got Queen 2, which a lot of Queen fans really, really like. And so I know that there are people watching this video who are right now thinking to themselves, well, this fucker. Gah, right? I apologize. Part of my problem with Queen 2 is one of the problems I have with most prog rock. And I don't think it's exactly, me out in left field saying that this is their most prog rocky album. One of the problems I have with prog rock is that prog rock is very often what I refer to as weird for weird's sake. It comes across to me as if it is being overtly artistic, which I find pretentious. So it's a personal thing. I kind of clash against prog rock, which means I kind of clash against Queen too. My notes: poster child for weird's sake. We've got 2 songs that I really like: Someday, One Day, and Seven Seas of Rye. But the rest of it is either unremarkable or weird, for the sake of being weird. I'm not saying it's bad. There's a lot of excellent musicianship, but the overall effect is weird for weird's sake. So that slots Queen 2 in at number 10. Now, I mentioned as we were going through in my run up to News of the World that I was going to upset some people with that. That's good beer. This next one's going to upset some people too. I have this in a virtual tie with Queen 2, which is a beloved album to many fans. And I'm giving this one the nod. They both got the same letter grade, but I do clearly like this album better than Queen 2. And that is Hot Space. So that's what it sounds like when everybody turns off a video at the same time. I like Hot Space. I didn't think I would. Okay, Hot Space is the first album where I stopped paying attention to Queen. Okay, The Game was the last album that when they released it, I got a copy of it and listened to it. And it was part of my regular rotation. From then on, I didn't really pay attention to them. So when we're talking about the albums made from Hot Space on, over the last few weeks when I've been preparing for this video, it's the first time I've listened to these albums. Which means it is entirely possible that as time goes by, and if I listen to the albums more frequently, that I will like them even more. It is highly unusual that repeated listening to an album will tend to lower its stock. Okay? What happens is I listen to an album and I form an initial opinion of it, and if that opinion is slightly favorable, then I keep listening to it, and it either goes up, the stock goes up, or it stays the same and I just stop listening to it, right? And A Kind of Magic, The Miracle, I don't see those things having stock that's going to rise. They might. I don't know about that. The Works might. And I think this one, the more I listen to it, the more I'm going to like it. Yeah, it's synth heavy, it's dance pop, and I'm not normally a huge dance pop fan, but it's dance pop, and it is fun. I'm not going to say it's a good album, but I will say it's fun. It sounds like they were having fun when they were making it, and I enjoyed listening to it. So that gives it a notch higher than Queen 2. We've got a few decent songs on here. Dancer, Backchat, Action This Day, Cool Cat. And we've got Under Pressure, the classic. But even the rest of it, even when they're songs that I'm thinking, that's a mediocre song, it's fun. This thing's a breath of fresh air. Number 9, Hot Space. Okay, number 8. One of the later albums. I'm giving it a good solid B. I recommend this album. From Queen 2 on, we're in B and A territory, right? So these are albums I recommend. It's just how strongly do I recommend it. And it's 1991's Innuendo. I think this is a good album. This also is one that I think the more I listen to it, the more I'm going to like it. It sounds, out of all of the later era, there is no comparison in the way these two sound. Okay? This thing is, oh man, is it a 1982 time capsule? This thing actually sounds more like classic 70s era Queen. And it's got some of the stronger songwriting that we've got among these later albums. We've got a few winners. I'm going off of my notes again because I'm not going to try to read that. I'm Going Slightly Mad. I really like that song. Headlong is good. I Can't Live With You. Delilah. There are people out there who just slag on Delilah, but man, not enough songs about cats in rock and roll as far as I'm concerned. A couple of mediocre songs. The title track is mediocre. I think The Hitman's mediocre. Bijou's mediocre. But overall, this thing is much better than I expected it to be. And when it's good, it's very, very good. So I do recommend. I'm recommending Queen 2 and Hot Space, but yeah, this. Number 8, Innuendo. Number 7. Number 7, I've got 1973's self-titled debut. There we go. Oh, That's in there somewhere. You know what the cover looks like. There we go. That's pretty good. Their self-titled debut from 1973, Queen. I would put this one. I mean, it's going to make my top 10 easily, simply because it's got "Keep Yourself Alive" on it. I mean, that's all we need. I mean, first track on the first album is one of the best songs they ever did. I mean, that's just fantastic, right? I mean, brilliant album opener. We've also got "Liar," which is good. Modern Times Rock and Roll sounds good. The lyrics are, but it sounds good. And then we've got a little bit of "Weird for Weird's Sake," "Great King Rat" and "My Fairy King" and all of that nonsense. We got a couple that are just, no thank you. "Doing All Right" and "Jesus" are, no thank you. But for the most part, it's listenable with moments of excellence. So we got a B+ here with Queen. Okay. Coming in at number 6, the biggest surprise to me as I was doing this. I mean, Hot Space cracking my top 10. That was a surprise. But even more of a surprise is this album that I've got better than Queen and Queen 2. And that is "Made in Heaven" from 1995. I went into this. Okay, so I knew that they recorded this after Freddie had died. I knew that they had that Freddie, as he saw the end of the line was near, he was recording as much as he could, recording vocal tracks for songs that he had written that the rest of the guys didn't have a chance to help him finish, and was working like a dog, trying to get stuff down on tape before he passed. And so they got together to complete that. So I knew that going in. But I expected that to mean that this was going to sound less than complete. I mean, as much respect as I have for Jeff Lynne as a producer, I don't think you can take "Real Love" and "Free as a Bird" and put them next to other Beatles songs, because they just, it's not quite there, right? Because it sounds like they're recording music to go over a pre-recorded vocal, right? I thought that's what this was going to sound like. And I was very pleasantly surprised at how, overall, how good the music is on this album. How good the songwriting is on this album. There are a few turkeys on here. "Mother Love," oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, man. I'm not a big fan of "Made in Heaven" or "My Life Has Been Saved." "A Winter's Tale" has some nice imagery in it, but it's not something that I'm going to want to listen to back to back. But it's also got some really good stuff. "Let Me Live," "I Was Born to Love You," "You Don't Fool Me." The reprise of "It's a Beautiful Day." I like the second version better than the first version. They add a little bit of punch to it. It turns into a really good song. Much, much better album than I was expecting it to be. And one that I think the more I listen to, the more I'm going to like it. So I really liked this, "Made in Heaven" from 1995. Okay, that was my last B. Now we're in A territory. For my top 5 here, these all get good solid A's to A pluses. A's to A pluses. Had to double check, make sure I'm not lying to you. Coming in at number 5, from 1974, we have "Sheer Heart Attack." Boy, howdy, do I love this album. It's one of those that when I listen to it, it's like, oh man, that's better than I thought it was, right? In my memory, it kind of fades a little bit, and then I listen to it, and it's like, oh no, I really like that one. And I listen to it, and oh wait, I really like that one. Killer Queen, I mean, that alone is worth the price of admission. Brighton Rock is great. Now I'm Here is great. Tenement Funster is great. Misfire, Bring Back That Leroy Brown. I mean, fantastic album. We got a little bit of Weird for Weird's Sake, but not very much. Overall, just good, strong songwriting, good, strong performances. Gotta love Sheer Heart Attack. Number 4. This one gets a good solid A. The Game from 1980. I think this album has some very good, some very strong songwriting on it. I don't know that the peaks are as high as on the albums that preceded it, including Sheer Heart Attack. But it doesn't have much in the way of valleys. I mean, this is the Game, I think, is a consistently strong album. And if I look at it as a total work, I think I've got good reason for putting it even higher than number 4. And if it weren't for the 3 standing in front of it, if this were another band's album, this is going to be at the top of their list, right? If this was a band's only album, it would be perfect, right? Here, the only reason it's falling as far as it is that in the context of the catalog, this is no longer superlative, because these 3 albums I can make the same basic comment about, but they're even better, right? But I really like the Game. I liked it when it first came out, still like it today. Number 3 is an album that, had I done this video, say 5 years ago, I think it would be even higher. I think it would be, in one of the top 2 spots, which makes me think that here in another 10 years or so, it's probably going to fall a little bit. And that is Day at the Races. There are a few songs on here that I just adore. Tie Your Mother Down is fantastic. You Take My Breath Away, But Somebody to Love. Oh, jeez, are you kidding me? Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy. Jeez, are you kidding me? White Man is good. The problem I have with this is that... Oh, Long Away. Oh, I forgot to mention that one. Fantastic. The problem I have is that our last 2 songs, Drowse and Teo Toriate, Let Us Cling Together. That's a drop-off in quality here at the very end. You don't want to have a drop-off in quality. You don't want the end of your album to sound like, oh, and here's the shit that we recorded that, okay, we got to stick it on here because, if you got a shit nugget that you got to include in your album, put it at the end of side 1 or put it in the middle of side 2. Don't put it toward the end of side 2. And I'm sorry, Brian, if you're watching this, that I'm calling Teo Toriate a shitbird, but yeah, it's a shit nugget. No, I'm overstating there for comic effect. It's not a shitty song. Drowse is not a shitty song. They're just not as strong as the rest of the album. It's a weak ending to the album. But overall, this was a sentimental favorite coming in, so that might be the reason why it's still placing ahead of Game, even though if I look at it, probably thinking Game might be the better album. Maybe I'll redo this. Coming in at number 2. Okay, I've got 2 albums left, and I think we all know what's going to be at number 1, which means, yeah, number 2 has to be Jazz. I really like Jazz. I think Jazz is a perfect album. I don't think there are any weak spots on here, right? What are the qualities of a perfect album? A perfect album is an album that has no skippers, an album that you listen to and can't think of anything that could be done that could improve it. It's an album that you listen to in one sitting because you're uncomfortable taking it in bits and pieces, and it is superlative. It's better than whatever it's stacked up against. That all, as far as I'm concerned, that all applies to Jazz. There's no weak spots on this album. Granted, there's no Bohemian Rhapsody on here, but there's no Bohemian Rhapsodies on most. the overwhelming percentage of albums don't have a Bohemian Rhapsody on them. In fact, if we're counting out compilations, there's only one album out there that's got a Bohemian Rhapsody on it. I wonder what that one is. This is a very strong album I've always liked. Mustafa's a great opener. Fat Bottom Girls is fantastic. I like Bicycle Race. Jealousy, okay. That's as close as we've got to a skipper on here, and I don't think it's a skipper. I'm going to jump ahead. Dead on Time, fantastic. And Only 7 Days, fantastic. Leaving Home Ain't Easy, fantastic. Don't Stop Me Now, oh Jesus Christ, fantastic, right? This album goes from peak to less of a peak to peak to less of a peak, right? No weak spots. Fantastic album. I love Jazz. I just don't know that it stacks up favorably compared to Night at the Opera. Now, come on, it's a Queen ranking video. You know that Night at the Opera is going to be number one. I mean, there are a few things that most lists that I've read and videos that I've watched agree on, but Night at the Opera is number one. I think that's consensus. This is the prototype of the perfect album. Even if you took Bohemian Rhapsody out of here, and a lot of people in these videos that I've watched, a lot of people are shitting on Bohemian Rhapsody, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not tired of listening to Bohemian Rhapsody. I can listen to that thing several thousand more times. I think the thing to remember when you're talking about music that you're tired of listening to, that's been overplayed, that's usually a sign that you didn't like it that much to begin with. If it's something that you like, it stands up to multiple playings. That's part of the joy of the music for me. I love listening to music repeatedly. So yeah, I'm never going to get tired of Bohemian Rhapsody. It's never going to suffer from overplay because I think it is a borderline perfect song. Of course I'm going to want to listen to it as often as I can. But even if we took Bohemian Rhapsody off of this thing, it would still be a perfect album because everything else is strong. There's no weak links here. Death on Two Legs is one of the angriest songs I've ever heard, and I love it because of that. Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon is fantastic. I'm in Love with My Car. Okay, Roger Taylor is not always the best songwriter in the world, but man, he knocked it out of the park there. You're My Best Friend. Oh, John Deacon knows how to write songs. 39, my favorite song out of their entire catalog, I told you back in my Brian May video. Sweet Lady is fantastic. Seaside Rendezvous is a hoot. The Prophet song is as close as we get to Weird for Weird's Sake on here, but I adore the Prophet song. Oh, I could listen to that on a loop all day long. Love of My Life is probably the weakest link we have on here from my perspective. I think it's a wonderful song. I think it is a vibrantly, emotionally direct song that I greatly enjoy. But it's not something I would want to listen to on a loop. Right? I love it. I just don't want to have to listen to it 3 times in a row. That's not exactly a criticism, right? Good Company. I adore Good Company. I even like God Save the Queen, for Christ's sake. This is a perfect album. Oh, man. Good stuff. And that's how I would rank the albums of Queen. I know you disagree, so go ahead, drop a line down below. Tell me what you think I got wrong. Tell me if you think I got something right beyond that. I think most of us are going to agree on that. If you enjoyed the conversation, I'd appreciate it if you'd click that like button. Go ahead, if you have not already, click the subscribe button. That would be awfully nice. And if you do subscribe, go ahead and click the bell icon for notifications. That would be nice as well. It makes a difference to the YouTube folks, so I would appreciate it. Thank you again for watching the video and for your comments. I always love hearing from you. And I hope that the rest of your day is uneventful. See you soon.